evening. Welcome to the India Development Debate right here on ET Now. I'm Supriya Shrinate. We're putting the spotlight on tax collections, new assessees, and what does this mean for the Indian economy. Even as the government is busy chest-thumping over the 71% rise in income tax filings for the last fiscal, the numbers are not adding up as far as direct tax collections are concerned. Income tax collections have grown only by 6.6%. In fact, the numbers suggest that growth in corporate tax is the lowest in 7 years, although experts blame the rise in refunds to stagnant tax collections. But the reality is that higher number of tax filers mean a larger tax base and could potentially unlock higher collections a few years from now. At ET Now, we are big champions of tax compliance, and we welcome higher number of tax filers. But yes, the biggest test of that tax compliance is not a statistic, but brute collections. This is the India Development Debate, and we dive deep into it to debate the tax bonanza. I'm Supriya Shrinate. I've got an expert panel right here with me. Dinesh Kanabar, CEO of Dhruv Advisors, joins us right here on ET Now. BM Singh, former chairman CBDT, Hitesh Jain, spokesperson of the BJP, and Mohammad Khan, representing the Congress party here. I want to begin on a note of optimism, and Mohammad Khan, I think it's only fair that I ask you the question. The total number of income tax returns e-filed up to the 31st of August has seen a rise of not 1 to 10%, but a rise of 71% at 5.42 crore versus 3.17 crore last year. Will you not concede this is significant growth in the number of taxpayers?
No, Supriya, at the cost of being uncharitable, I will not concede that. I would in fact say it's a modest policy tweak that they're touting as a success. For a government bankrupt of any real or material success, I'm not surprised. The number of people have increased, as you have pointed out on this debate earlier, because they have made it they have attached a penalty to it. If you don't file, you'll have to pay 5,000 rupees. So students who are not earning any amount of money, people who are PhD scholars, people who work with civil society organizations or don't qualify for these tax brackets, will still have to file the ITRs or risk paying a penalty of 5,000. You have compelled compliance by way of this coercion, and you have not increased the tax base. You're not going to get more money out of this. That will be the telling figure. And you and I both know that the bulk of this increase will be people who will not fall in the taxable brackets. And I'm certain, though this is anecdotal at this point, Supriya, I'm certain that this will be vindicated when actual data is brought out by the Central Board of Direct Taxes on this issue. I feel that the Modi government was not given a mandate to do things, and I'll conclude my opening statement with this. I don't think that the Modi government was given a mandate to carry out modest policy tweaks like this. The Modi government was given a mandate of 282, a historic mandate, and was blessed with low oil prices so that they could bring about institutional reform. And they have squandered that. If this is what they have to show after 4.5 years as a success, well, I'm very sorry. Their yardstick is substantially shorter than what was promised.
All right. I'm not going to perhaps agree with you completely on your decision not to be charitable, but I will take this across to Hitesh Jain. And Hitesh, you are a trained CA. Will it not be wise to wait for the data for the entire year before drawing some chest-thumping conclusions on just the numbers that have come in at the end of 31st August 2018?
Well, there are reasons to cheer for two factors. We are talking about 71% insofar as personal income tax is concerned. But there has been 8-fold increase in the presumptive tax scheme, the people who have filed under presumptive tax scheme. Now, mind you well, presumptive tax scheme is also applicable for those business people whose turnover is less than 2 crore and professionals up to 50 lakhs. And that is a significant number. And when we are talking about 8% increase in the presumptive tax scheme, this is something to cheer about. Second, the advance tax data which came in the first quarter, there was 44% increase in the advance tax collection and 17% also in the corporate tax collection. So we are seeing a significant number also in terms of advance tax and the corporate tax. And we are all aware that certain advanced, when you are filing, filing your advance tax, or when you are paying your advance tax, that is on the basis of assumption where you assess your income at that quarter and you make certain assumption and then you deposit the advance tax and the income tax. And when we are talking about as high as 71%, I don't want to get into this whole debate about with Congress, because they did not do anything in their case, it was not even more than 2.5 crore. Now we are looking at tax return in the term of 7 to 8 crore. When you look at historically, we have got a 4-year mandate in which we have increased so much tax compliance. Out of 70 years, they have got the mandate for 60 years. What have they done to increase the tax base? Is it something that the tax compliance has to start now, or this was something they should have started to look at it historically and ensure that maximum people are under the tax net? And this reforms do not come in isolation. You have to take steps. For example, the steps introduced by us last year, where a single page return was introduced, where you can file a return.
Hitesh, please give me a minute. I'll have to come in there because I want to go across to... Hitesh, give me a minute. You've made a very substantial point, but give me a minute. I want to come across to Mr. Kanabar. And Mr. Kanabar, you know, the truth lies somewhere in between what Mohammed Khan is saying and what Hitesh Jain is saying. The truth lies in, if you really look at figures, growth in personal income tax collection to nominal GDP growth between the 5 years of fiscal year 11 and 16 was 112%. Between fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 18 was 184%. Growth in total income tax collection between those 5 years was 88%. And between 17 and 18, it was 145%. From someone who understands this extremely well, is it new taxpayers that we are looking at, or is it better compliance that we are looking at? What are we essentially staring at this moment?
Well, my earlier two speakers on this call are people who are into politics, and I'm not here to make a political statement at all. The way I would look at it is really that there are a number of committees with the government set up, and I happen to be part of some of those committees, are recommending to government that what was essential for tax purposes. And the key thing which came in was to bring into the net several people who are currently outside the tax net. And on that, there had been precious little movement. What did that result in? So there were taxpayers who are already in the tax net, and because the government wanted to increase the revenues, every time you did everything and more to collect more and more taxes from the existing taxpayers. So you inflated their income, you charged them more on items which probably was not chargeable and which got into litigation. I think what I can certainly say is that in the last 1.5 years, for the first time, we have seen a significant expansion in the base of taxpayers, and that is very, very critical. Maybe those taxpayers today are not paying huge numbers, but once a person is inside the tax net, then you have an ability to monitor whether he is being complying regularly, whether he is now accounting for credits in his accounts, etc., etc. To my mind, that's a very, very significant achievement, and that significant achievement has long-term benefits beyond 1 year. So while one is looking at the percentage increase, as was thought to be talked about 71% increase in advance, etc., the real benefit is that with so many people additionally in the tax net, we now have an ability to monitor the economy. And while there is one important statistics which nobody has really bothered to find out, and maybe ET now should do something about it, is that earlier there was a presumption that maybe 40% plus of our economy was the unregulated economy. I am very sure that that has come down. How much that has come down, I really have no basis to comment.
Right. No, Dinesh Kanabar, I think you make an extremely important point that people who now come into the tax net can be monitored. A deeper analysis can be done of what they do. Are they complying or not complying? So this is perhaps not a one-year exercise. But let me take this forward with Mr. Singh also, who's here with us. And as a former, head of the CBDT, so a deeper analysis shows that despite the increase in tax filers, direct tax collections have not really gone up very substantially. A CRISIL report, if I'm not wrong, suggests that direct tax collection has grown by just 6.6%. Corporate taxes even lower, which is the lowest in 7 years. Is the number of people filing then a mere statistic, and the truth really lies and the reality really lies in tax collection? Or do you agree with Mr. Kanabar that somewhere the number of people coming into the tax net will eventually unlock the potential of the amount of tax that can be collected?
Yeah, somewhat I agree with Dinesh Kanabar. We should be increasing our database of number of tax filers, because then we can monitor their future filing of returns, the future earning of income. But the asset test for our department at the end of the day is how much have we collected. As has been reported, it has been a very modest increase in tax collection of 6.6%, but that does not show a great increase compared to the number of returns which have been filed. And this is because I feel, firstly, because of the penalties which were to be levied if you did not file the return, and secondly, because most of these people who filed the return had already been subjected to a withholding tax. TDS had already come into the government coffers in the last financial year, and now the same people who would not have filed the return, saying that we have already paid the tax, had to file the return because of the penalty looming ahead in case they did not file the return. But again, I am very glad that so many people have come forward and filed the return, because this will increase our database, it will increase our efforts to monitor them in the future. You must realize that this was started years back. One of the factors which has now, I think, come into play is that we went into a particular mode of keeping a digital footprint of most transactions above a certain limit. And these transactions were then, this information was being then disseminated to the tax assessing officers, and they could use it for asking explanations.
Right. Mr. Singh, if I may please come in for a minute.
This would have an effect.
Mr. Singh, if I may please come in for a minute, because you raise an important point. Mr. Singh, give me a minute. You raise an important point that the reality and the test of taxes really lie in how much the department collected, and on that count it has been a very modest growth, but the reality also is that a higher base means potentially more collection later on. Mohammed Khan, to the point that you made, and the contrarian point is that the fact that many more people are at least taking to filing taxes, it could be because of penalties that are likely to be imposed or whatever. The fact that people are looking at filing taxes must prove that at least the tax evasion culture in India is on the wane, and there is fear that evaders will be brought to book. It's time that happens.
Unfortunately, Supriya, measures like these often fail, especially when it's a BJP government, fail to achieve the stated objective and end up penalizing the man who stands at the very end of the line. I'll explain why. Let me first paraphrase an Urdu couplet that I think is appropriate here. जब दर्जी से कुर्ता खराब हो जाता है, वो बनियान के फायदे गिनाने लगता है. I remember reading the manifesto in 2014 where they boldly declared that they would end tax terrorism. Now, in the 4 years since, what have they done on that front? They have amended the Finance Act to give powers to assessing officers to raid your premises without providing any reason. It cannot be questioned in a court of law. They have taken away the power of judicial review. Number one, earlier you could, now you can't. Number two, if their tax policies are indeed so inviting and so easy, why did $23,000 millionaires leave India between 14 and 18 during your tenure? And according to a report by Morgan Stanley and reported widely across the pink papers. Number three, why has investment fallen? Why has investment fallen so terribly over the last 2.5 years? Why has manufacturing suffered? Of course, don't give me the example of the last quarter, which we believe is a flash in the pan, but your other policies have been incredibly myopic. So now you turn around, after 4.5 years, I'll make the same point.
Okay.
You turn around,
Mama, can't give me a minute, I'll have to come in on that.
This modest achievement as your single greatest,
All right. I'm going to... All right. No, I'll come in there. I'll come in there, and I will request each one of you to make crisp, brief points, because I have a lot of ground to cover. I don't want questions to remain unanswered. Hitesh, like Mohammed Khan said, and it was alluded to by Mr. Singh, who's been head of the Income Tax Department, that it isn't just compliance, it is also being done out of fear. Even the presumptive income tax 681% rise or whatever else you spoke about is an impact that there is a sort of fear. People are perhaps alluding to tax terror. They don't want the taxman to come calling. They don't want to be penalized. They genuinely perhaps want to pay tax because they want to avoid any sort of tax terror being unleashed on them.
Well, I do not agree, because the problem is in the Congress party, everybody is suffering from one common disease, that is speaking lies, right from their leader to the spokesperson to their this thing. We saw what happened outside their party office also, so they can continue to peddle the lies. Let's not get into that. But let me come to the point of the
cited by
presumptive
sources.
tax
I doubt
scheme.
you can do the
Under
same.
the presumptive tax scheme, you are not even required to maintain the books. You are not even required to maintain the books. You are required to straight away on the 2 crore. If your income is less than 2 crore, 8% will be considered as your net income and you have to pay the tax. You are not even required to maintain the books. Where is the problem over there? Up to 5 lakhs, I mean, if you will look at it, up to 2.5 lakhs, there is no tax. From 2.5 lakhs to 5 lakhs, there is hardly 5%. So no burden is even pushed on the common man. So the last man on the line, in fact, is not paying any tax. Now you come to the third part, that there has been no scrutiny for non-business tax players also whose income is up to 5 lakhs. Even insofar as the raids and other things are concerned, the number of raids during the Congress period, and now there is certainly difference. And I will give you one short example. In the demonetization exercise, what we saw, 33% of cash was deposited by 1,50,000 people. So those people who have deposited high tax, we have to investigate and find out, because at one end, if the looking at the number of population, number of business and everything, and if you look at the compliance data, to increase the compliance, there has to be a carrot and the stick method.
Okay. Hitesh makes a point about a carrot and stick. People who've deposited higher number of cash in the bank cannot be gone scot-free. But Mr. Kanabar, coming to you, if you look at the number of returns e-filed by salaried individuals, that has gone up by 54% as well. This is an increase of nearly 1.18 crore, if I'm given to understand. How significant is that, and what is contributing to this? This can't be the 7th pay commission alone, can it?
I think there are multiple things which have been happening out here, and while I come specifically to the question which you have raised, one was this whole issue regarding raids and everything else. And has there been an abatement of tax terrorism? I would like to say that that's one area where probably a lot needs to be done. There was always a tax terrorism. And while several things have started to happen, that's an area where probably the government needs to do a lot more. And again, I'm saying that I'm not getting into the politics of the whole situation. But all tax regime works only on compliance. And compliance can happen only and only when there is an ability to monitor. So whether it is these 54% increase in salary taxpayer returns, and that is certainly not on account of pay commission, because most of those employees, I would like to believe, are already in the pay threshold. But really, we are looking at people in the unorganized sector who are earning salary, now starting to file returns, etc. That base increase is the only thing which will allow the government to monitor really where is the economy going and how do you, and I think one other thing which I don't think anybody is speaking about is that we are looking at the increase in tax base in itself. There is the other issue which is GST. The implementation of GST allows you to track the movement of goods. Today when you start when you start making payment for goods, you need to show the resources, and therefore you have no option but to get into a direct tax compliance. So together, the two things together, the fact that there is a direct tax compliance which is inevitable.
Dinesh Kanabar, hold that thought. I get that point. No. Okay. Dinesh Kanabar, I get that point, and I'm going to take that point forward with Mr. B.M. Singh. Mr. Singh, like Dinesh Kanabar was pointing out there, GST has perhaps held in formalization. It has pulled in informal businesses into the tax net. What difference do you believe the Direct Tax Committee report will make to tax collections and compliance? It's due in September. My own understanding is, higher, if you lower the taxes, you simplify the structure, the higher the compliance. What do you believe, what do you make of that report that's due in September, sir?
Well, I don't know what the report is. When the report comes out, we'll have a look at it. But I've always believed that if you lower the taxes, make the tax compliance simpler, people will come forward and file the returns and pay the taxes. And also, like somebody said, a carrot and stick policy, we have to have penalties for not filing their returns, for not complying with the tax, this thing. I'm not so sure that we should levy a penalty just because a return has not been filed, but it has served its purpose and people have filed returns. Because if a person's taxes have been paid and he's paying his taxes, and if he misses the deadline, say of end of July or end of August, I'm not sure how culpable he is to pay a penalty of 5,000 odd rupees. I think that is a bit harsh, but people have come forward and filed the return. And GST, and like Dinesh Kanabar said, GST would definitely have made a push to making people fall in line and keeping their accounts in the proper way, so they have to comply with the tax payment. But you know, over here, a large number of people who have filed the returns are salaried employed. There has been a push-up in Right. There has been a large push-up in the salaries of people.
You make an important point there, and you alluded to that point before. But I will quickly go to, right. I'll go across to Mohammed Khan. I've got very little time left on the show. And Mohammed, a research by former CA Arvind Subramanian in February 2014, before Mr. Modi came to power, shows that before the UPA came to power in 2004, tax assessees were growing at an average rate of 16%. Between 2004, 2005 and 2011-2012, that number dropped to 2.5%. Why did that slippage happen? Because this slippage was faster than the rate at which you were going. And you know, and you were growing more than the previous governments. So why could you not increase taxpayer participation? Is that a red on your report card?
Perhaps I'm certain that Mr. Subramaniam would have elaborated on the reasons in his report, but I think it would, the numbers would correlate to you know, the growth rates at that point of time. But there is something else I want to say here, something very important. I have great problems with this government tax desperate revenue model. They are so desperate to collect tax, and I'll give you 3 examples. First is, when oil prices fell to $29 a barrel, the government didn't reduce the central excise, keeping oil prices more or less stagnant. When Mr. Jaitley was asked why, he said we're creating a buffer for difficult times. When asked on the floor of Parliament, that netted them 10 lakh crores. We do not know till date what they've spent that for. That was tax revenue. Number 2, when the budget for this year was presented, we debated this on ET now, where did they bring in a new source of revenue from? They reintroduced long-term capital gains tax, a tax that squarely hits the middle class and those who save using small instruments like SIPs and mutual funds, right? So again, this is not a government that's your friend. This is a government that only looks at maximizing revenue through taxation because it's so bankrupt vis-a-vis imagination and other steps. Number 3, last month I did a debate on your sister channel Mirror Now, but the topic of discussion was that the government is now mooting taxing these e-retailers for the discounts they give you, because the discounts they give are written off as losses and they can't tax them. They cannot
that
abide
is under
the
review.
fact
I don't know if
that a single
Mr.
penny
Channel
is getting
knows
away from
that.
them. This is the very definition of tax terrorism.
Mohammed Khan, the reality is that policy is still under review. That policy is not been formalized. That policy is still under review. Let's not discuss a policy that's under review. But Hitesh Jain, will let you have the quick last word, but very quickly. You may have increased the tax return filers, which is all very good. You know, potentially they will unlock more taxes. But have you traded off growth? That's exactly what has happened in this period. And has it been worth the exercise? All right, you know, I'm all for GST. I'm totally against demonetization. But you've done those things. A better GST would have led to better results. But demonetization, what have you done? You've traded off growth.
Well, I think this is a very subjective debate, whether it is a demonetization or GST on the basis of, like, I mean, you know, we need a larger debate, but demonetization certainly on the basis of what amount came in the bank. People were trying to say, oh, this exercise is a failure or success. You cannot debate on such basis. You have to understand the importance of demonetization, the very fact that there has been increase in the tax compliance, the very fact that we have got a data that 33% of the demonetized cash was hoarded by 1,50,000 people. When were you going to get such kind of data? Today, when we are talking about black money, we are talking about an extraordinary situation in the country. It requires an extraordinary measures. I mean, you cannot just subjectively decide what is failure or this thing. As far as GST is concerned, it was one of the most important measure. Fine, we can debate on the basis of implementation, but nobody can decide that the time for GST was not now, but it should have been what, 8 years before. They should have had that willpower to get the consensus,
I don't think,
and they should have got the GST 8 years before. So, I mean, idea
is... Can I say something? Can I say one sentence?
Agree to disagree on this issue.
Let me come in there.
We can agree
No,
to
no.
disagree.
Okay, Hitesh, I agree with you. Hitesh, I agree with you. The time for the GST was now, if not yesterday. I don't disagree with you on that. The time for GST is now, was yesterday, and not, and in fact 10 years back and not even now. The reality is that demonetization was an exercise that's questionable, and you know, you're right. Perhaps tax and demonetization need to be two separate debates, but this is an outcome of that. Having said that, thank you very, very much, Dinesh Kanebar, Mr. B.M. Singh, Mr. Hitesh Jain, and of course Mr. Mohammad Khan for joining us on this edition of the India Development Debate. We at ET Now are all for a tax-compliant society. India can only balance equitable growth if more and more people who can pay taxes are made to pay taxes. Tax evasion is a habit, it is a culture, and India will serve itself well if we get rid of this. Having said that, tax filers in their numbers is perhaps a statistic. It is the tax collection that is going to be more important, and whether it's the BJP government or tomorrow if it's another government that comes to power, they should focus more on tax compliance. Bringing the people who evade taxes in the tax net is far more important than numbers on the table.